Today, we're going to explore a concept that is hard to put into words, but we're going to be calling it mindful focus. But rather than explaining it directly right now, I need to share something. While writing today's episode, I found it very hard to create a straightforward linear flow, and it was after some initial frustration that I had a realization that perhaps a good format for this particular episode would be less linear, but to be more of a series of 5 different perspectives, which, as you listen and contemplate them, you might find your mind making its own connections between them. Perhaps certain parts will resonate with your life more than others. Perhaps you might even find that multiple listens might bear deeper fruit for you. Funnily enough, this contemplative style follows the same spirit of contemplation in mindful meditation that we're actually going to explore. This is the complexity, but also the simple beauty of mindful focus. As you contemplate and practice it, it will become clearer and easier to you. But personally, I'm beginning to suspect that it can't be fully imparted through words alone. This has at least been my own experience of learning it. What I will say though is this: cultivating the skill of mindful focus will help bring you stability and resilience through the internal and external gale winds of life. And it'll give you the ability to manage and direct your mental energies where you decide to direct them. For a deeper understanding, please sit back and enjoy the following 5 perspectives. I'm your host, John Ostman. Welcome to Redlily Radio. Radio. Perspective number 1, mindfulness and meditation. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the current world leader of Tibetan Buddhism, created teachings on how to practice the way to a meaningful life. These teachings were translated and then edited into a book of the same name by Jeffrey Hopkins. And in one of the chapters of the book called Focusing the Mind, the Dalai Lama shares insights into mindfulness and the different types of meditation that practitioners can take to find peace and focus. Quote, "The force behind developing concentrated meditation is mindfulness, which is the ability to stay with an object, not allowing distraction. You exercise mindfulness by putting your mind back on the object of meditation every time it falters, which will happen again and again." Unquote. One of the breakthroughs for me personally with this kind of focus was the acknowledgement that our mind is always moving and will always get distracted. The trick is not in never being distracted in the first place, but rather in bringing our attention back to the object of focus each time it does get distracted. And much like practicing anything else, this actually becomes easier and easier the more that you do it. The ability to do this opens up all sorts of possibilities about how and where you can then direct your attention. And here are some more ideas from the Dalai Lama. Quote, "2 basic types of meditation are analytical meditation and stabilizing meditation. In analytical meditation, you analyze a topic, trying to understand it through reasoning. In stabilizing meditation, you fix your mind on a single object or topic. Calm abiding is cultivated through stabilizing meditation." Unquote. He goes on to say that, quote, "Another way of dividing meditation is between subjective meditation and objective meditation. In subjective meditation, your aim is to cultivate in the mind a new or strengthened perspective or attitude. The cultivation of faith is an example of this type of meditation. Faith is not the object on which you are concentrating, but rather it's an attitude that is being meditatively cultivated. In objective meditation, you meditate on a topic, such as on impermanence, or on an object, such as on the golden body of a Buddha." Unquote. These benefits of the practice of mindfulness being used to direct your mental attention towards one of these ends is captured well in these teachings of the Dalai Lama. Perspective 2. Emotional agility. Dr. Susan David is a psychologist who learned at a young age that ignoring all negative emotions and forcing positive emotions on yourself can actually be counterproductive. Growing up in South Africa, which was rife with political and social issues at the time, when David was 15, her father died from colon cancer. Also, unfortunately, leaving her family with a mountain of debts to clear. Between the grief of the loss of her dad and the stress that this debt created, she was left in a dark place. Luckily for her, she found a redeeming light in her English teacher around that same time. The English teacher got the students to do a project, and this project was to write a personal journal throughout that year. Dr. David says that, quote, "Every day I would write about my guilt, my sadness, the fact that my family life had been changed forever. And I realized afterwards it was showing up to my difficult experiences and labeling them and putting language around them that ultimately helped me not only get through the experience, but to thrive." Unquote. This experience shaped the rest of Dr. David's life, leading her into psychology and eventually writing the book called Emotional Agility, which gives us techniques for navigating our emotional world. For the full in-depth, fleshed-out exploration, go check out her book. But for the purposes of today, we'll summarize her findings in the following principle. Our emotions should not make decisions for us. However, our emotions can contain really important information about what is valuable to us. This is why both the extremes of ignoring our emotions and of making decisions purely based on emotion are both unhealthy. Ignoring emotions means that we may miss important feedback and end up out of sync with our core values. Letting ourselves get too swept up in emotion, on the other hand, and making decisions purely based on them can lead us to impulsive, inconsistent, and unwise decision making, which may also be destructive in the long term. The key here is that the first part of taking a step back and being able to manage our emotions is to start recognizing them, and as they flow through our minds, labeling them. It is this labeling of emotions and giving them the time that they deserve that can help us to work through them and learn from them in the most effective and emotionally agile way. Perspective 3. Resilience first. The Art of War is an ancient Chinese text from the 5th century BC, and it's ascribed to the possibly mythical Sun Tzu. As in, some scholars believe it was Sun Tzu, some scholars believe Sun Tzu didn't even exist. Either way, being a text of military strategy for winning wars efficiently, deceptively, and aiming to reduce the unnecessary loss of life. The way in which the Art of War has been written and translated leaves it very open for the use as metaphor. Because of this, the strategies within the Art of War have since been transplanted to other domains such as business, sports, and even healthy self-development. One section named The Scroll of Observing Patterns starts with this line, and quote, "The good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat, and then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy." Unquote. Note that as we are interested in the positive self and social development realm, the key in our metaphorical interpretation here is to take any time that it has the words the enemy or deception and to supplant those words with something more healthy to our current peacetime environment. So for us, the takeaway of this quote could read something like, "Set yourself up to be outside the possibility of eternal failure. With this resilience, you will last long enough for great opportunities to open up. Your success then comes from jumping on these opportunities when they open up at the right time." And so, strategically closing or protecting the gaps in your defense is something that will require different approaches, from good planning to risk assessment to information gathering to developing your emotional and attention management skills. In this episode, we are looking at the last one. In practicing mindful focus and emotional agility, we will not be so disrupted by the internal gale winds that could push us around and prevent us from staying resilient and moving forward in the long term. It is this mental resilience that will allow us to continue moving forwards until great opportunities do open up. It comes down to simple maths, really. The longer that we're in the game, the longer that we continue moving forwards, the more chance there is that great opportunities will emerge. And according to the Art of War, it is through these great opportunities that we find our victories. Perspective 4. Channeling Spirit. If we jump across the ocean now from China to Japan, and jump from the 5th century BC to 1632 AD, we can find another text, this time named something very similar actually, this time named the Book of Family Traditions on the Art of War. Despite the similar name, it's actually a totally different book, I assure you. This one was written by Yagyu Munenori, who was considered so skilled at fighting a swordplay that he became the official martial arts teacher to the family of the ruling shogunate, or the ruling warrior class of the time, and eventually becoming the head of the Secret Service at the time that he wrote this book. The English translation that I am reading from was translated by Thomas Cleary. Divided into several sections, one of them is called The Life-Giving Sword. Early in this section, Yagyu explores the more metaphysical concept of utilizing spirit for effectiveness. Quote, "When the spirit is within, the wonder manifests outwardly. This is called an inscrutable marvel. For example, because there is a spirit of tree within a tree, therefore its flowers blossom fragrantly, it turns green, its branches and leaves flourish. This is called the marvel. Even though you may break wood down, you do not see anything you may cool the spirit of the tree. Yet if there was no spirit, the flowers and the foliage would not come out. This is also true of the human spirit. Even though you cannot open up the body to see something that you may cool the spirit, it is by the virtue of the existence of the spirit within that you perform various actions. When you stabilize the spirit in situations where swords are with wonder, thereby all sorts of marvels appear in the hands and feet, causing flowers to bloom in battle. Unquote. People still debate today over what spirit actually is, whether it's a solo separate entity to the body, or whether it is a name given to the emergent personality and consciousness of the bodily systems of a human being. Either way, it might be useful to look at it in this context as something that, as a force, you can cultivate through practice. Just like you can practice to play a game of football with your body, you can practice to channel spirit through your body and through mindful focus. Then, perhaps, might flowers bloom around everything that you do? Perspective 5. The neuroscience of mindfulness. In 2010, Dr. John B. Arden released a book called Rewire Your Brain. This book aimed to bring the emerging understanding of neuroplasticity to the general public. Now, neuroplasticity is the fairly recent discovery that our brains actually can be rewired throughout our lives through practice, and that an old dog can indeed learn new tricks. In the final chapter of the book, Dr. Arden turns his attention to the neurological benefits of mindfulness. Quote, "The Dalai Lama has said that if scientific discoveries conflict with Buddhist doctrine, the doctrine must evolve with these discoveries. Indeed, he has taken a big interest in neuroscience and has invited the major researchers to present their discoveries. The research on meditation has consequently flowered and has shown how mindfulness positively affects the brain." Unquote. Dr. Arden discusses why he teaches mindfulness in his own anxiety classes. He discusses how the process of labeling your emotions can activate your left prefrontal cortex. This is the section of your brain at the very front, right behind your forehead. There is also a strong relationship between mindfulness and the activation of your left prefrontal cortex. The activation of this section of your brain also helps to calm another part of your brain, the amygdala, which is a core driver in our emotional systems and survival instincts, and can have a part to play in things like anxiety, depression, and impulsiveness. The practice of mindfulness has also shown to have positive benefits on people's immune systems, as well as the reduction of anxiety and depression. It's especially powerful for people who naturally find it difficult to manage their emotions as well. Coinciding with his own findings, Dr. Arden explains that Richard Davidson and his colleagues at the University of Wisconsin have actually examined the brains of Tibetan Buddhist monks who have been practicing meditation for many years. Their results showed that through this mindful meditation, the monks' brains indeed did show great activation in their left prefrontal cortex, along with a range of other startling insights into their mindfully focused brain. Our attention is one of our most valuable resources. Generally speaking, the areas that we direct our attention to, these are the areas that flourish in our lives and in ourselves. This attention can be pushed and pulled from place to place by the internal gale winds of emotions and fears and the external gale winds of distraction. But as we continue to practice mindful focus, bringing our attention back to the place that we choose, we will find ourselves getting better at it, and as a result, we will find ourselves becoming more resilient, more focused, and more self-directed. And so this is my wish for you. May you find your way of cultivating your mindful focus. May you clearly feel the increasing peace, patience, and clarity that comes with continuously practicing this. May this allow you to continue walking more resiliently so you will come across more clear opportunities. And may this reduce the fear of the emotions that might run through you, but instead bring you mindful focus, serenity, and clarity wherever you go. Redlily Radio is produced as part of Redlily Coaching, where we leverage one-on-one coaching, technologies, and this podcast to help grow your personal direction and empower your life in our increasingly technological world. For more information, visit www.redlilycoaching.com.